Hey everybody, welcome. I'm so excited to join you with Krista Strayer, Rosie doing our backup tech stuff, and all the other people who get to watch this video. I'm for the eoLIFE Education Hub and all the good things. So, Krista, I met you when I went and did the Yoga Kids like week long training up in Panorama and
Mhm.
was just so blessed and learned so much. And at that time, had the opportunity to introduce you to essential oils. It's been what, like that was like 2014. So you've been
Mhm.
using the essential oils and growing and learning along with us like ever since then. And you have your yoga background. And I think it was just about that time when you were also working in Ayurveda training. Am I right on that?
Pretty close after that, if not at that time, right after that, I kind of stepped in. I originally got the oils just to kind of deal with my preteen daughters and um, to get, some of that emotional, which was great. It was a
Ah,
huge help as they were becoming teens and teenagers. And I used to facilitate or train yoga kids teachers, I guess it was, and do
yeah.
a lot of teaching yoga in the schools. And then I switched from just being that like gym teacher that would go into the gym once, 1 week a year, to training the teachers to use yoga in the classrooms. And
Mhm.
then looking at, okay, the biggest thing we can do for the kids is actually to look at the parents and their health and parents and the teachers, right? And let's like calm that down, let's get that sorted, and then our kids will be fine.
Yeah.
And so that's what led me into Ayurveda, and possibly from and largely for myself too. That there's
Mhm.
just pieces missing, like in terms of yoga is great, but it's not the whole picture,
Right,
right?
right.
And I find oils are great too, but again, not the whole picture. And we talk about that and how we have to have those foundational elements in place. But when you mix them all together, it is just this really juicy, yummy. It all makes sense. It all kind of comes in together.
I love
So
it. I'm so excited to hear more about it. Essential oils for your dosha. So you'll help all of us who are newer to Ayurveda know what Ayurveda is and what doshas are. So, so many fun things. So I'm going to
yeah.
let you just get started. Everybody, welcome, Krista, and we will listen in and let you teach us some more.
All right, thank you. Yeah, diving in, like, what is a dosha? Right, first question, like, what is this thing she's talking about? And your dosha is kind of like the key to your personality. It's your personality, your yoga personality type. It's the yoga version of Myers-Briggs type thing. Um, and so your dosha really gives you some really keys about yourself and how you operate naturally, what's good for you, what's not good for you, that type of thing. And but then when you add in the oils, it really helps this tool that we have to either balance your dosha or they can push you over the edge, right? And so typically our oils have a pretty balanced chemistry, but there's a few exceptions of things that you might be using. It's like, why isn't this working for me? Or why am I why is this not giving me the reason that I want to? So we can talk a little bit about that. But first of all, we'll kind of, just kind of do something a little playful to get started. And I've been like trying to think of like, what's the oil that personifies? I'm not going to say it's like the best oil for your dosha, but what's the oil that personifies each dosha? So are you like lavender? Are you slender, subject to the wind? You could be tall stalk or short stalk, but it feels like the wind can blow you over. And there's not a lot of matter or physical substance to your body. And your mind is like the wind, it goes a million different directions and it's kind of like always churning around. You have projects like seeds that are flying all over the place. It's hard to contain them in one spot. Are you intuitive like our little lavender? Are you spiritually connected? Do you talk to your angels more than the people around you? Then you might be Vada. Okay. Or are you like a rose? Are you powerful, intense, prickly, to the point? Maybe a little snobby, perhaps, to the daisies and the weeds around you. You expect others to catch on and blossom just like you. You're decisive and you know what needs to get done, and you're proud, you're regal. And you should be, because not everybody gets accomplished what you do in each day. Then, if that's the case, you might be Pitta. Or are you more like a magnolia? So you're lush and moist and hardy of the earth, just kind of that softness to you. and compassionate, and people are just attracted to you for your warmth and your understanding and your nurturing. You see the best in everybody, and you offer this haven for everybody that you meet. And you're content just to simply live in harmony. And then you might be a kapha. Okay, so we're going to go into this and dive in a little bit deeper, and then we're going to dive in quite a bit deeper onto the oil side of what that is. So really the power of your dosha is knowing your true nature, right? So knowing what's right for you and letting go of the shoulds, right? So those shoulds are things that work for those other flowers that are out there, but not for you, right? And when we amplify your nature with nature, so amplifying who you are with your essential oils, that's when you really kind of tune into your magic, into that zone, okay? And so just, start to think about, do you have some of these shoulds in your head, or that voice on your shoulder that you feel guilty about ignoring? But what if it was totally right for you to ignore it and you should ignore it? What if the should is something that's not right for you? And that's why it's hard to do it, right? So we're showered with advice and self-help. There's no end of things out there, whether you should go running, whether you should work out with weights, whether you should eat smoothies for breakfast or have a really good hearty breakfast. Should you be a vegetarian, or should you do keto? Should you drink hot water? And should you put lemon in it, right? And the list goes on. And while they're all super great things, they may not be great for you, right? And so your nature is the key to you and the key to the awareness of you. And once you're aware of something, it just starts to appear everywhere. Like you just start to see it all over the place. And you start to see these patterns and think, this is why I do this all the time. This is why I resist all the time. This is why I do this. And all of a sudden everything gets out of control, that type of thing. And I am totally a why girl, right? I need to know the why. And once I do, it's done, right? Or at least it makes it a little bit easier. It may not be always done, but it's just easier to stay on track because you know the why behind what's going on. So today we're going to explore your nature, what your natural tendencies are and aren't, and just kind of see what's kind of bringing you out of balance and see where you're out of balance here tonight. So your nature and Mother Nature pair perfectly. So know that as we talk about different things, we're going to look for those links of where that's going to get to, where that's going to kind of naturally flow in together. And I love how these ancient wisdoms are now, what's the word? These ancient wisdoms are now being validated, right? In terms of where we're at. So science is currently validating all of these truths that used to get passed down generation from generation, and we had a break within our wisdom, passing on our wisdom stories, right? So this is a great opportunity, a great era that we live in, our great time to validate your intuition and find ways to trust your gut on an even deeper and deeper level, right? Okay, so get ready to cut through some of this noise and find out what's really, really important and what's going to make the biggest difference for you. So Ayurveda, welcome to this wonderful, wonderful world of Ayurveda. It is 5,000 years old. It starts from the Vedic philosophy system, or the Vedic society, which kind of predates India and Pakistan, right? So it's kind of in that area, but it's predated all of that. So it's not religious in any way. It doesn't get kind of form into that. It's basically the science of life. So in the Vedic tradition, or the Vedic society, it's kind of like this utopian community where everything lived in harmony. And there was this beautiful synergy between nature and people and humans, right? And they studied nature, and they, tried to analyze it and bring these different aspects of nature into their own life. And then so there's this, ancient wisdom written in this ancient dialect or text that all of a sudden, as wars broke out and countries broke off into different things and different religions kind of came forward, then we lost a lot of this ancient wisdom that we have. And just a question for you guys, and you can, and Don posted there. If you have questions and comments, please post them in our chat, and we'll definitely, we can make this interactive as we go along. So post in there if you trust that there's wisdom in our history, and trust that there's wisdom in Mother Nature, okay? And I think my belief is that long ago there was this wisdom on our earth that we tuned out. And now we're at that point where we're really ready to listen again to what this is. All right, so this is where it all began, essentially, and I think it's kind of where we lost our way to a degree. So both Ayurvedic wisdom, which was that, Vedic period or India, Pakistan, and the traditional Chinese medicine. So both Eastern sciences that kind of had their roots in the same era, the same time frame. And they both have this belief that we're composed of elements, right? And so they're slightly different in their beliefs. Ayurveda has 5 elements, and we believe that we're composed of minerals, water, heat, air, and spaces, essentially. And on the surface, it seems a little hokey. And this is, I think, where the translation's like, what do you mean? It's hard to imagine yourself being made of mud and stars, right? It doesn't seem far-fetched. This doesn't look at all like mud or stars to me, right? But when you take it down and kind of analyze it, it's all simply chemistry. So instead of being made of mud, what if the earth was minerals, right? So instead of being like we're made of earth, but the earth is actually minerals, right? And then we will look at water. Water, we believe, we've been taught that we're 70% or whatever water. Fire is that heat, that transformation. It's the heat that's released with reactions. Endothermic, we could get like super, super sciencey, but we won't go there. Air is our breath. It's our prana. It's our life force. It's what gives life throughout our body. Without it, we don't live, right? And space isn't necessarily just like the stars, but it's the space between the molecules, the space in your lungs and your joints, and even the space in your mind, even the spaces in your bones, right? You've got little spaces in there. So just take a moment and just kind of sense into this. Like, and feel your body. You can even touch it, right? Feel those elements that are there, that sense of spaciousness, that heat, like you can blow out and feel the heat that comes on your hands, feel the breath that's there. And so you can kind of learn it and feel all of this through your body and not just my words. So then we kind of tap into these doshas. And these doshas are just categories essentially that describe our personalities and the different amounts of each of the elements that's within us. So we all have everything. We have minerals, water, heat, fire, air, and this space within our body. But we all have different amounts of each one of these, right? So someone who's a kapha nature is more dense and solid. They're more of the earth than others. They also have this water, this juiciness to them, somewhat ability to go with the flow. They're harmonious, they're comforting. One often describes kapha as the glue that holds everything together. So cozy kaphas are super nice to be around. They're that comforting, kind of mother nature type of a person. And pittas also have some water, but it's a less relaxed form. So where the kapha water is this nice, still, calm pond, the pitta water might be like a raging stream, or it might even be water that's being heated up and starting to evaporate, right? So it's kind of bubbling and active in its nature. And then they have this fire element, right? So they operate at a higher temperature. Maybe they need to let off steam every once in a while. They're very intense, they're direct, they're focused. Like girl on fire and boy on a mission, they get things done and they make things happen, right? So super, super important. And then our Vadas, totally different structure, right? They're more airy, they're light. They feel like the wind can just like blow them away. Their thoughts are like the wind and they kind of come and they go. They're spacey, perhaps more spiritually focused than material. They're not quite of the earth. And they're more connected to something that's beyond the world, that's creative, dreamy, maybe not always in this particular moment, okay? And so who are you? You may have already taken a dosha test, and if you have, I'm just looking at the chats there. If you have, post it in there as to who you are. And if you haven't, don't worry, we're going to do a little quasi test. And actually, I'm going to put this in our chat. I do have a dosha test. You can find them all over the internet. This is the one that I have on my website. Don't do it now, but you can come back and do that later. And it's kind of hard to describe everything in like a simple test. So for sometimes it's like super clear, this is what it is. For others, it takes a little bit of detective work. So we have to kind of like work in nuance as to what exactly it is. But so feel free, put what you are, put what your family is. Excellent. And then we're gonna dive into what this is. So this is a really simplified test in terms of discovering your dosha. And as you do this, you can kind of think about what your usual state, your typical state is, or how you've been for the majority of your life, not just in this moment. So there's kind of 2 types of your dosha, like the one that you're born with, And then sometimes we have this variable one, that's one that, comes in when things are out of balance, things kind of get out of whack. So you may have symptoms that show up on some of these aspects that aren't your true nature. So think about it as someone else would describe you, or has how you've always been. Okay. So and then you just it's simply a matter of like just putting the check marks in, right? And that Deb's a Kappa, totally. And John's got the Vada. Vada is one that goes out of whack for all of us, whether you're Vada or not. Just our society, that tends to happen. So it's going to go through the checklist there, and then you're just going to count up how many you have. So Vadas are those slender, small bone people. They can be tall or short. It's variable, right? Typically not average, but tall or short. Their skin is prone to dryness. It's flaky. It's rough. They're light sleepers. Their appetite is erratic. So their eyes are bigger than their stomach, or they might even forget to eat. But they kind of need to eat to get more grounded. They're always on the go. They're hyperactive, always in motion. My family always kind of describes me like, how come you can never sit still? Right? It's just not who I am. Right? They're lively but easily distracted. And they're adaptable. They're always changing things. They might be always moving the furniture around or changing jobs. That would be Vata. Pittas are more that athletic build. They're average height and weight. Their eyes, this is kind of the giveaway. They have really closely spaced, sharp, penetrating eyes. They might have a reddish a tinge to their complexion or red hair. They tend to be more sound sleepers. Like when they decide to go to sleep, they go to sleep. Right? They can have this, hollow leg syndrome where they can eat anything, they can digest anything. But if they're out of balance, they can get hangry and just like need their food now, right? They are purposeful, perfectionistic, competitive, courageous, assertive. All of those are our pittas. Kaphas tend to get a bit more large boned, right? So it's easier for them to gain weight and harder to lose it. Their eyes, this is my Kapha giveaway, is the eyes are large and open and loving. So do people always tell you you have big eyes, and they have really nice skin and hair? It's like moist and luscious and lustrous. And they could sleep all day. They love to sleep in, and it's kind of hard to get them moving. Once you get a Kapha moving, they stay on track. But just to get them there is the difficulty, right? You may not be hungry in the morning. So everybody's always telling you to eat this big breakfast, and it's just like you just can't even face the fact of food. You may not eat as often as someone like a Vata might need to eat 4 or 5 times a day, and a Kapha is like 2. And they're really easygoing and nurturing. So people just kind of gravitate towards you. They're always kind of around you. They're very accepting of people, but they don't like change. They really like things the way they are. Okay, so kind of like, do your little test, and then you get your little check marks. Oops, I went backwards instead of forwards. See if I can get my mouse going the right way. And then this gives you who you are, right? In terms of, this is mine typically on the day that I wrote this. So it's 6 Vata, 6 Pitta, and just 2 Kaphas. Typically, and I always 2 Kaphas, no matter how many questions there are, I only get 2 Kaphas. I'm not always nice to be around. I'm not that juicy person, and I'm okay with that. Finally, after a few years, right? I'm usually neck and neck with Vata and Pitta, depending on what's going on with me, or just depending on the nuances of the questions. Okay, so you're super important. This is like your balance state. And then I want to just take a really quick peek at what's out of balance and what might be going on. And this is where you're going to start to see some ahas as we start to talk about the oils and what oils might be good for the different doshas. It's going to be, coming into Dawn, we're totally similar in our natures, as we know. So once you kind of look at what's out of balance, that gives us some cues as to what's going to be really helpful. Okay, so I'm going to blow this up because that's way too many words on a page for me to look at. So when you're Vadas, Vata out of balance feels like anxiousness or worry, frequent fidgeting, always on the move, dry skin, chapped lips, constipated. So everything in Ayurveda is, revolves around the gut. There's always a gut kind of thing going on with everybody. But gas and bloating is a Vata. Remember, it's space, right? Air and ether, it's space. The sleep can be interrupted and restless as a Vata thing. So that jumpy leg syndrome would be Vata, right? Nervous system disorders, Vata. Indecisive, difficult to focus. Craving chips and popcorn would be a Vata imbalance type thing. And again, you can kind of like, do your math or kind of just check off. And this kind of gives us, you start to think of those things back in the back of your mind, what might be helpful for Vadas that are out of balance or anybody who has a Vata imbalance. So it works that way too. Okay, and then coming into your Pittas. So red and inflamed skin. So inflammation is a Pitta thing. Achy muscles can be a Pitta thing. Achy joints would be Vata, and then achy muscles would be more Pitta. Acid reflux, heartburn, ulcers, all of that is Pitta. Frequently hangry, loose stools. So whereas Vata is like dry and nothing moves when they're out of balance, Pittas move things through too quickly. Either way, you don't get the nutrients out of your food. Okay. Irritation, anger, frustration, Pitta imbalance, judgmental, critical, intolerant, perfectionistic, and craving spicy foods and alcohol is another one. And Pittas typically love their spice and they typically love their red wine, not necessarily what they should have, right? Um, Kaphas, excess mucus and congestion. So any respiratory stuff, lungs is the big kapha center within your body. Bowel movements, if they're slow and stinky or sticky, that would be a kapha. Just feeling heavy and slow and lethargic within your body is a kapha imbalance. Stubborn or resistant to change, slow to make decisions, prone to emotional eating, hoarding and overly attached, feeling depressed and low, craving sweet and heavy foods. And this long term so relates to inflammation within the body because of congestion, right? And then or congestion, I guess, within the body, so clogged arteries, that type of thing. But also just that hoarding nature can lead to eating disorders and that type of thing as well. And coming into depression and all the lethargy and that type of thing step into our kaphas, right? In terms of when it goes way, way out of back. So you might get like an out of balance thing that's got things all over the map. Even though I said I was like Vata Pitta, I still have a lot of kapha things that might be out of whack within your body. And sometimes one area being out of whack throws everything else off. So it's not like, oh, I have to balance kapha and I have to balance pitta and I have to balance vata. We're going to start with the worst one, and that should throw everything else kind of back in, and then we can sort of, tackle them. So that's how you would work at it, kind of defining those solutions. But let's go deeper into understanding yourself, right? And understanding this nature of you. Because it's super, super fascinating, right? So Vata people are made of air and ether, essentially, right? So they just have more Vata in each of their cells. They're just light, right? There's a lot of movement kind of going on there. They thrive on change and they resist, to the point of death. They resist their routine. They do not love consistency. So think of this like tall hipster couple, right? That's spiritually focused, big picture thinkers, creative artsy types, yoga teachers, but then out of balance, think fearful, worried, anxious, that type of thing. They're also disorganized. So their desk is if you can see my desk right now, it is definitely Vata. And then nervous system is the big one. So Vata disorder, as you get into your senior years, your wisdom years, turns into things like mind imbalances and all of those things that we think of in that area. Okay. So as you're looking at this list, there's a few things that pop out for me. So I'm going to show you this list again, but with those pop outs. So grounding, right? We want our oils to be grounding. We want it to be warming. So think of Vata cold. So Vatas are cold and Kaphas are cold, we're going to see, but Vatas are cold like outer space cold, like always really, really cold. So really intense warming is needed in that. Their digestive system is really, really key, especially the colon kind of coming into that, but then the gas and the bloating, so that's a key one. Joints, brain, and anxiety are areas that we're going to focus in on for our Vatas. And so in this regard, we get to some of our oils. Get to my right notes. So grounding, so balance oil. Like if you had one oil you could have as a Vata, it's probably balance one, right? It's going to be it. So tree oils, myrrh is this oil of Mother Nature. So it, in a sense, personifies Kapha, but that is really needed because they don't have it. And for a long time, I think for several years, my myrrh used to just seep out of my bottle. It was just trying to get to me. And I didn't know why. I thought everybody's myrrh just did this until Rosie was talking one time. And it was just like, oh, it's trying to get to me. It's trying to speak to me as to what I need in this moment. So myrrh is like super, super grounding. Think of it as that kapha in a bottle that Vadas are missing in terms of what those elements are. Black spruce is a beautiful one, and I find black spruce can be like tridosha. It kind of does all things. Vetiver, again, if you had to pick one, that vetiver would be up there too. Anchor blend, if you look at what's in that yoga blend for anchor, it's just, it's just talking to Vadas particularly. Warming, so any of our warming spices. So I have my little warm tea. Always want to have hot water when you're a Vata. Never ever ice water if you're a Vata. Like if they bring it to you at the restaurant, if we ever had restaurants again, you just send that back, right? You don't even touch that. You need to have, go get the hot water, and then have those like on guard is beautiful for warming that up. So the season for Vata, if we kind of skipped over that, but it's like fall to midwinter. So all of those Vata, those fall spices are exactly what a Vata needs. So, and they're all in our little on guard blend, right? Ginger is another one. So I often do lemon ginger is a favorite for me as well. Cinnamon, clove, cassia, all of those heating up ones. The one that is not nice for Vata would be nutmeg, right? And so this is where you get to some of the nuances. All of these others, help with flow within your digestive system. Nutmeg is a binder. So nutmeg is the one that will prescribe to a pitta to kind of bind things together when things are moving too quickly out of the system, if you know what I mean on that one. So yeah, warming, digestive, anything kind of in there, especially on the warming end. Turmeric is a super good one for kind of heating that up. It works again. Turmeric can be tridoshic and what it does. It's a big one for that. Pink pepper, I like a little bit even better than black pepper for a Vata, just because Vatas are going to like you know, stay a little bit away. The Vatas need sweet, sour, salty, not so much astringent and bitter and all those things that are really dry in nature. So the pink pepper is a little bit less drying, I find, in nature than black pepper. Both are fine, they're heating, but just if you had to pick one, that would be where to go. Um, Cardamom is another beautiful spice that kind of works across the ages. It's not as heating, so it works for some of the for pittas as well as we go into that. But then think of your joints and kind of that pain that you can have within your joints. So we want our copaiba, our wintergreen, our lemongrass. All of those things are good supports for that. Clarity of mind, like lemon. I always, or not always, but quite often will have a lemon in my diffuser just because it helps me kind of cut through all of the ideas and just focus in on what's important. So super good for that. And then if you think about Vadas are adaptable, right? They're always changing. Adaptive is another perfect oil for Vadas, right? In terms of, bringing up what their nature is. I'll talk about that on the next slide. Florals, any of the florals are good because they have that warm, nurturing, heavy kind of nature to them. So all of those are super good for Vadas as well. And basil is another little gem that quite often this excess energy and movement can lead to adrenal fatigue and what's going on in there. And so basil is a great one for in the area. So then so that's kind of the how you bring a Vata back into balance. Okay, so this one here is how you amplify your Vata nature. Now you have to take this one with a little grain of salt or a little grain of awareness, because some of the things that will amplify, not all, but there's can be a few things that can throw the Vata out of balance, right? So so like attracts like. So we are attracted to the things, we're attracted to our own nature, but if you get too much of that happening, it can throw you off, right? And so that's where the opposites kind of create that balance in terms of how we look at um, our staying in balance kind of thing. And frankincense is definitely one that's that spiritual one um, that works for that. It's grounding in nature. So it's one that you can kind of soak it up. It can be a little bit drying, would be the only aspect of frankincense that you might have to watch out for. I like my copaiba because it's just a little bit more luscious. It's a sap versus the hard resin. So kind of, look at the plant and what it is on that. Sandalwood, again, super kind of juicy, nurturing, that moistness to it. So intuitive, lavender is a kind of it's the one I picked to personify the Vata, but with too much lavender, it's too light and airy and spacey and doesn't have that grounding ability to it. So you can see where that kind of goes out. So clary sage, if you're looking to, magnify your intuitive nature, clary sage is just a little bit heavier, right? A little bit juicier, so it doesn't have that kind of dryness or that same airiness that the lavender does to pull it out. And then, wild orange is great for that creative, tangerine, citrus bliss. But again, if you have all citruses and no grounding, it's just going to cause that Vata mind to, explode, and nothing ever gets done in a day, right? So you got to kind of watch that in there. Same thing with cypress. It's good for bringing things into motion, but too much could be too much, right? Um, for manifesting and actually bringing things in, this isn't necessarily their nature, but it's kind of into that area. um, you know, I guess it's kind of more the balance feature, but Litsia is your oil of manifestation. I just love it for this one. Balance patchouli, so even like a mixture of those just to kind of bring things into play. And then the nervous system adaptive, of course, or florals, your anchor, frankincense, all of that juiciness kind of coming into that. And then, so any questions on that before we move on? Let me check where our timing is. I always get like, I'm trying to talk as fast as I can to put as much information in here. So feel free to comment or to even, unmute and kind of go into that. We're totally okay with that. So coming into Pittas, right? So this is our little Pitta couple kind of up in there. They've got the reddish complexion. They're very athletic built. If you were to zoom in on them, their eyes are kind of closely spaced together. Um, so they're decisive, they move at full throttle, they just kind of get things done. They're just very action orientated and they crave that transformational aspect. So Pitta, the season for Pitta is summer. So that kind of their nature is the sun. And they're made of that fire and water we talked about. Qualities for them, you have to just kind of trust my word. We're not going to go super deep into the Ayurveda side of this, but their qualities are sharp, hot, oily, smooth, and mobile. Okay. And the areas in the body that it tends to affect for your Pitta is the small intestines, the skin, the liver, the eyes, the heart, the blood. This is like a partial list. It's not everything, but it's kind of like the key ones. In balance, they're super passionate about things, they're decisive, they're the leaders, but out of balance, they tend to be more angry, irritated, maybe in some inflammatory disorders coming into play. I think I've got some different ones on this page. Some inflammations within the body comes in there, heartburn, that ulcers, we talked about that going forward. Joyful. So in balance, just think of, I always think of a heart for Pitta. It's kind of like heartburn and anger and heart attacks is where it can go out of balance in your Pitta nature. But when it's in balance, it's just this joyful love, this serving mentality when it's there, right? So kind of think of that joyful nature. So the big words that pop out for me, cooling. Cooling. Can I say cooling about 3 more times? Cooling in their nature for Pitta is what we want to think of first. Calming. Calming is kind of cooling, right? Digestive, there is some digestive things going on. Pitta, nature within your body. This is where I love how science is catching up to the ancient wisdom, and that our Pitta time of day or when you digest food best is between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. So science, Western medicine has now confirmed that we produce the most bile between 10 and 2 p.m. So bile would be a Pitta part of the body, right? And so it's kind of confirming that that's our key digestion. So think of Pittas as transformation, as digestion, breaking things down into usable pieces is kind of our Pitta nature. So digestive, there's some elements into that. Pittas can typically have good digestion, but there's maybe it's too good at times, since we need to cool down that aspect in there. Inflammation in the body kind of pops up, and then releasing. So they tend to go out of balance in this anger and irritation, and because they're good at getting things done. Sometimes they can be control freaks, right? And so they have to release and surrender and let go. Just notice my body doing this as I do that, right? That's my Pitta nature coming into play. So those are some of our keywords, and there's probably already a whole bunch of oils that are popping into your mind for this Pitta nature and what to do. So cooling, so bringing it into balance, cooling, definitely number one, peppermint, right? Peppermint, absolutely all the way. Even those peppermint, enteric coated peppermint, just like number one for Pittas. It's going to help anything that's going on there. Spearmint as well, super good. Lavender, cooling again. So even though we call that lavender our Vada, quite often we need the opposite, right? And so lavender, you think summertime, you got skin stuff going on, you want your peppermint, your lavender, kind of cooling all that within your body. They're hot headed, so you need to cool down those emotions. And that's where our rose comes into play a little bit there. Our jasmine, our black spruce can kind of like calm things down, put things together. Our sandalwoods, Roman chamomile, so serenity could be a top oil for your pitta natures and just kind of like bringing things in there. I think if we had a new one. No, we had the RX. That's for the other one. I love that. That's a great tridoshic blend there too. Inflammation, you think of like letting things go. So we've got our peppermint to kind of cool things down, but our deep blue with that, oil of surrender and all of that aspect, kind of, cool that inflammation, those muscles down within there. The tri-ease blend for the inflammation that within the body. Turmeric again pops up, copahiba. Releasing again, you have that wintergreen oil of surrender. Juniper berry is an interesting one for releasing that, the underlying emotions, right? So it's the oil of the night, so the opposite of the sun. So it's going to help bring that into balance. Citronella is another one that's really good for kind of releasing and letting go of things, letting go of that control. Immortelle is another top one that came up for me and kind of looking at the different oils that were in there. Plus, it's super good for our skin, right? For that impacts our pittas. And then our anger, we want some of that self-love element coming in, like our geraniums, bergamot, forgive, and peace are like two like key ones that need to come into that pitta area of our life. And then amplifying where they're going, passion, right? So passion, but we have to watch it because too much spice can throw pitta like way overboard. So maybe they get too involved in their passion, and then they stop being, able to like connect with others, or not being able to see what others aren't catching things as quickly as they can, right? So kind of watching that element. And oh, I've got these cooling oils in there. So for, ignore that. For passion, put passion oil, and cinnamon and those type of spices would amplify their passion. And these are the ones that are going to cool that down. I must have had a mind flip when I was doing these slides. Their purpose, the Roman chamomile is a good cooling one that helps with you with your spiritual purpose and staying on track with that. The Align yoga oil, I was looking at the three of these and it's like, oh, there's just one for each one. So Align is like keeping. So think of that. I like to think of the rose, and when it's a bud, it's like this perfect point. And so pittas are like pointed, they have a direction to them. And so think of that that alignment and keeping on to that direction. Immortelle again is another really good one for bringing us in there. To look it up, and then maybe somebody can look up what Immortelle, what the emotional aspect of that one was. I don't use that one a lot, but when I looked at it, I was like, oh, that's just perfect. So someone could type that in, that'd be great. And then, action oriented again, manifesting, getting things done. Lipsia, blue tansy, the oil of inspired action, right? Coming forth into that. And again, those are ones that aren't necessarily going to throw pittas out of balance in that regard. Joy, our, peppermint, that joyful nature coming into that. Lime is that oil of the zest for life. I'm going to tell you a story. We'll leave that for a moment on lime and why lime is key for our pittas over some of the other citrus ones. Elevation comes in there, cheer, beautiful. But again, too much citrus can be too acidic for a pitta, too acidic in nature. And so we really have to kind of tamper that off and not be too for spiritual insight. Thank you. So that kind of gives it that same like purpose and on keeping on track with that. So good, again, Immortelle is going to be good all across the board in terms of that. I like our blends because they tend to be balanced in that. Transformation, so Zendocrine, right? Zendocrine is transforming and releasing some of these things. It's got cilantro in it, which is the oil of releasing control, right? Number one for like pittas and just like letting go, but it's also transforming. So it's taking these heavy metals and getting rid of them out of our body. Zendocrine is, helps with our liver and all of those aspects that relate to our pitta organs. The helichrysum, again, just transforming hurts into something else. So you're kind of releasing some of that anger and hurt on all of that. The great oil on the positive side of that as well. And then, yes, it's your oil of the digestion, right? It just personifies what a pitta is all about. Okay. And I like Zengest. Let's go back to that one because our Zengest is pretty tridoshic, but it's not too heavy. So you might, for a Vada lean more to like a lemon ginger if the Jendesh is too cooling. But it's pretty well balanced in terms of Ayurvedic spices that's in there. But it works well for pittas because sometimes if there's like too much ginger or something involved in it, it would be too aggravating for the pitta nature in that regard. So Jendesh helps with both regards: too fast, too slow, too hot, too cold. All of that it kind of brings into balance. Okay, so there's our lovely pittas. Let's slip into our luscious, our cozy kaffas. So we have our visionary Vadas, our passionate pittas, and now we have our cozy kaffas. Kapha is what pulls things together, right? So it's this cohesive nature. So think of like water and earth mixed together. Could be like a mud pie, but it's sticky, it's gooey, it's that kind of attraction. So maybe it's even like the center of the earth that's pulling that gravitational force that pulls things in. Okay, so it's nourishing, it's lubricating, um, and it just kind of brings us, kind of repairs our systems within the body, right? So Kapha people tend to be more grounded, right? They're more of the earth. They're comfortable to be around, but then on the flip side, they might be hard to get moving. They love their routines, right? They don't love change. They love that sense of routine and getting a Kapha to take their LLV, not a problem. Just tell them and it's done. getting getting a Vata, you have to tell them a lot of times. But they're juicy, they're attractive, right? And when they get started with something, they don't stop. They're finishers. They complete things. They have a really good memory. And that memory of the elephant really refers to like a kapha nature on that. The time of this, so our doshas also relate to the calendar of the year, right? So the calendar part for our kapha is, late winter, early spring. So think the moist part of spring. So the Kapha or the Vata part of winter is the cold, dry, intense, the really cold, bitter cold part. And then once it's just the cool and the hot and the wet, heavy snow, that's more of a Kapha. You might, relate that to places you live too, but kind of coming into that. The nature of the Kapha is the moon. Just think how the moon it pulls the tides. It kind of has this pull to it. The location for this is the stomach. So that's kind of where digestion starts, is right within the stomach itself, as opposed to the small intestine or large intestine for the others. Lungs is like the primary organ though for a kapha, and the sinuses. And then it can be like the tissues and even the connective tissues within the body are kapha. It's like that connectiveness that kind of links everything together. And they're calm, loving. And again, I was, adjusting my slides. So I'm going to go to this one because I have more words for this one. They're accepting this really strong stamina. So they can do, pretty hard physical activity. They've got this, strength to them, and they're very content peoples, right? But out of balance, that contentness can be like a greedy, a hoarding, a holding on to. So when that cohesiveness gets to be too strong, and then, so that goes to our congestive disorders. Then that can be into depression, into hoarding and overeating. And some of those eating disorders can come into play within that kapha part of our body. So words that highlighted for me when I was kind of looking at this, like warming, maybe not as hot as or intense as or not as heating as a Vata needs, but you still need that warming element. You need to get moving, so that's movement needs kind of have in there. Lungs definitely as the part of the body, and the sense of clarity, because kapha can be one of those words that we described it as cloudy. Sometimes can be more cloudy in nature. Just think of that water and the earth kind of mixed together, so that they're needing more of a sense of lightness to them. Okay, and then as we look into this for our oils, we have, so bringing them back into balance. Again, we have our warming, our on guard, cinnamon, cassia. And some of these, cinnamon can be more drying in nature. So again, good for kapha on that side. Both of the peppers, the black and the pink pepper, are really good. The ginger is another, great one for kaphas. And you see that in terms of respiratory and how it helps with that system as well, right? Mucus. So a cold can have different natures, and so a kapha cold is more of a congested, um, you know, snotty cold, right? Where a vata cold might be that dry hacking cough to it type thing. And then in terms of movement, getting the movement, so motivate is a beautiful oil for our kaphas. Anything citrus is going to be wonderful for our kapha natures. And cypress is another good one in there. Blue tansy is a great one for there. And then lungs, and I've kind of written this, I just realized in the Canadianese, it's taken me a long time to not have to, for my Canadian team, not have to like translate everything from the US names to the Canadian. So my apologies to our US people on this one. So easy air is the same as breathe. Eucalyptus, rosemary, aromatouch. Aromatouch again is tridoshic. It is just like the most nourishing Ayurvedic blend that we have out there. I love it for that. Cardamom again is kind of tends to be more drying in nature, but heating, so and good for the lungs, right? So think of cardamom as another beautiful one for our kaphas. And then we have clarity, right? So citrus, grapefruit is that oil of, self-love and honoring your body. I love it for kaphas and also helps with that tendency to overeat and snack. So smart and sassy or slim and sassy is really good for that one. Celery seed is a neat little one that kind of comes into play. So some of the foods for kapha is they're actually the opposite of vata. So vata is sweet, sour, salty. Kapha is astringent, bitter, and pungent. And so celery is one of those astringent in nature kind of a foods. And so our celery seed oil is just like wonderful for kaphas in that regard. Lemongrass, again, connective tissue, right? So kind of looking into that. Lemon myrtle is another good one. If you look at that in the emotional book, it's just like speaking exactly to what a kapha is needing. Melissa is that oil of light, right? And so bringing that aspect in, so elevation blend is just another beautiful kapha blend for that. Wild orange, that oil of abundance. Again, any of the citruses are great for our kapha natures. Neroli, so some of the lighter florals. So you don't want anything that's too heavy and moist in nature. Maroli kind of, passed that test. Magnolia is the one that I picked, but it is more on the heavier side, but it kind of personifies what a kapha is. And Arise is that blend, the yoga blend that's perfect for a kapha. And just coming into bringing the kaphas into balance, right? And so the cohesiveness. So cedarwood is that oil of community, right? Our marjoram, I think, is connection, and myrrh is Mother Earth. So too much myrrh, again, is going to be too heavy and cloying, and that heavy nature for a kapha. So that's the one to watch, but the other two should be totally fine. So cedarwood is a little bit more that drying, a little bit lightness to it. So it's a beautiful oil for a kaphas. Nourishing, so again, that motivate our cypress. Yarrow palm is a really good nourishing one that kind of comes into play for our kaphas. And then magnolia, spikenard is a good one because it's not too heavy in nature, and wild orange for kind of that love and compassion kind of coming into that. Ylang ylang, that inner child. So kapha time of life is the child phase, right? And so, really nurturing that kapha, just that joy of the moment, coming into play with that. Lime is the zest for life. Peppermint is that buoyant heart and kind of coming into that aspect of that. And then grounded, right? So balance again, covers across the board. Frankincense, myrrh, you got to take that with a little bit of a grain of awareness coming into that one. And this one here is just a slide of some of my, just kind of a quick summary. If you just had to pick a few for each of the doshas, what that would kind of look like. So just, Vada, think warming, grounding, clarity, right? Just getting that focus. Maybe focus would be a good word for our Vadas. Pittas, it's kind of that cooling, pacifying, releasing, coming into play. And then our kaphas are warming, uplifting, and cleansing. And just, I'm going to open up to questions in a moment, but just, it's all like coming into chemistry. So trusting your nature of who you are and understanding who you are, and then trusting this beautiful nature that we have. And I have a really good example of the nature. And I'm just going to see if I have PJ's book with me. Here we go. Essential Oils Unlocked. So when we talk, one of the big Ayurvedic things that we do every morning is we have our lemon water, right? And lemon is actually quite acidic in nature. So for a pitta, it can be a little bit too fiery, a little bit too much. So often, and this is just like ancient wisdom, so pittas, if or lemon is too drying in your nature, then use lime, right? And so I looked it up in terms of what it is. And so lime has more of the calming aspect than lemon. So they both have that aspect where they're going to like fuel up your digestive system and kind of kickstart all of that. They're going to remove toxins. But the pittas are already really good at toxin removal. What they're missing is some of that just acceptance and love and that kind of nature. And lime has a higher percentage of that. So you can kind of look in terms of like the breakdown of what that is, and you can kind of see how that kind of plays into picture. So I love how, oh, it's a monoterpene hydrocarbons versus this. I could look at my notes, like it would be on there. And so one of them is that cleansing nature, and the other one is the go with the flow and just kind of release and relax, the chill out nature of what you need in there. Okay. And we need the whole picture, right? So when we look at just things in isolation, that's when it gets to be difficult. And that's the same thing with our oils and our other supports that we have out there. So when you get the whole nature of the plant, quite often, for the majority, we only had a handful of things where I would say, like, watch out, because our oil chemistry typically tends to be really balanced in nature. And again, we only, you know, these these therapeutic, uses for our oils and this balancing come into play when we're talking about our doTERRA oils, right? It's a whole different ball game, a whole different, you know, a whole different product, right, than the other essential oils out there, because they're made for their therapeutic reasons and not just for how well they smell. So take something like basil. And I learned this from PJ the other night. So basil, and I'm always kind of like, basil doesn't really smell like basil, right? It's kind of off. I'm not really going to use it in my like tomato and bocconcini salad. Like it's not going to give the right flavor. But because our basil has been sourced therapeutically, it doesn't have the same smell, but it's really good for our adrenals. So I'm willing to let go of that smell and that not, personifying what I'm thinking of is about basil in my salad for the benefit that we get for building up our adrenal system and what we call ojas within the Ayurvedic system. We'll save that one for another day. So you need that whole picture. And then just wanted to end with this little you know, message, I guess, that don't wait for the stars to align. Reach up, rearrange them the way you want them to be, and create your own constellation. So you are your own person. You are perfect exactly how you were created. And, so just reach up and grab those aspects of your personality that make you you, and run with it and go with it. And so, with that little bit of knowledge, hopefully you'll be able to do that even with a higher regard on that. Okay. Questions, comments, ahas? What was going through your mind with all of that?
So much goodness. Thank you, Krista.
You are very welcome,
I was
Dawn.
taking screenshots.
I can send
Like,
you the presentation if you want.
no, it's good because I shouldn't say screenshots. I was taking some pics with my phone, right? Because I'm like, I want to be able to bring this up to my forefront really quickly. So if it's a picture on my phone, I can do that, right?
Yeah.
Just really, really great reminders. I loved it, Krista. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I took a picture of the Vada one and sent it to texted it to Chase, and he said when he edits it, he's definitely gonna watch because he really knows that like this would be good information for him.
There's lots of good stuff for him in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
For all of us, right? And so any of those things that kind of just went, oh, that's what that's about. I know Deb and I have talked before. Deb can't, speak. She doesn't have a microphone, but all through her childhood, she had congestive. Hopefully it's okay. Deb, you can let me know in the chat if it's okay. But she had a lot of sinus congestion, right? And then when she, read this, it's like, oh, kapha. That's what it's about. Like that's my nature. And your childhood is kapha time added to your kapha. That's just kind of the nature of who you are. And that's going to be the thing that goes out the most often within your life. So hopefully it kind of, yeah, thank you. So it kind of makes sense as to what's kind of going on within it.